It all started in a quiet courtroom, the kind of place where stories usually end, not begin. The judge sat high above, his gavel resting beside a stack of case files. His face, stern and unreadable, barely moved as a young black teenager stood before him, hands trembling slightly, trying to stand tall. The boy was just 17, thin, nervous, wearing his best shirt, though it was slightly too big and clearly worn. His eyes scanned the courtroom, not looking for sympathy, just someone to see him, really see him. The charge was minor, a scuffle after school. No one was seriously hurt. But when the judge started speaking, his words felt far heavier than the situation called for, cold, dismissive, like he'd already made up his mind before the boy had even walked in. The courtroom felt colder with every word, every accusation, every assumption. It wasn't just the sentence the judge handed down. It was how quickly he gave it, like he didn't even care to listen. Like this boy's story didn't matter, like he was just another number. People in the courtroom exchanged glances. A few shook their heads, but no one said a word. No one except the boy. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. With quiet hands, he held it up, not to protest, but to show. It was a picture of his family. His mom, his younger sister, his late grandfather, and one face in particular made the judge stop mid-sentence. Meanwhile, months before this courtroom scene, the same boy had been riding the bus home one rainy afternoon. The city was gray and heavy with storm clouds. People kept to themselves, headphones in, eyes down. That's when she stepped on, the pregnant woman. Tired, soaked from the rain, and clearly uncomfortable. The boy, sitting near the middle, didn't hesitate. He stood up, nodded politely, and offered her his seat. She smiled, said thank you, and sat down with a sigh of relief. She didn't say much during the ride. Neither did he. But as her stop approached, she turned to him and slipped something into his hand. A small, folded piece of paper. "Open this when you're alone," she whispered before stepping off the bus and disappearing into the crowd. What the note said would shake the boy's world in ways he never saw coming, and somehow, that single act of kindness would tie directly into the moment he now faced in that cold courtroom. But back in the courtroom, the judge now stared at the photo. His eyes narrowed, his hand paused above the gavel, and a look of recognition, followed by something deeper, crossed his face. The room, once filled with quiet murmurs and the rustling of papers, went still. Everyone could feel the shift. The boy's public defender leaned forward, confused. The court clerk raised an eyebrow. And the judge. Well, the judge leaned back in his chair, looking like he had just seen a ghost. Who was in that photo that made him freeze like that? What did the note from the pregnant woman say? And how were these two moments, seemingly unrelated, about to collide and rewrite the fate of a young man who had almost been written off before his story even began? The truth, as it turns out, would leave everyone speechless. The judge didn't say a word for a long time. His fingers twitched slightly on the edge of the bench, his jaw clenched, and his eyes stayed locked on the photo the boy was holding. Everyone noticed the change in the room. It was like someone had pulled the plug and drained all the air out. The boy, unsure of what had just happened, stood frozen. His hand still held the picture out, though it was beginning to tremble just a little. The photo itself wasn't anything extraordinary at first glance, just a family snapshot, slightly faded, probably taken during a holiday or a backyard BBQ, one of those ordinary moments that people usually forget. But that hold whole, lifetimes inside, a mother with kind eyes, a little girl hugging her big brother's leg, and in the background an older man in a military uniform, sitting on a lawn chair, smiling like he had all the time in the world. And right there next to him, barely noticeable, unless you really looked, was a younger version of the judge himself. The boy didn't know why the judge reacted like that. He only knew what his mother told him. Always carry that photo. It reminds people you're not just a case file. You come from people. You come from love. He didn't think it would matter. Not in court. Not to someone like this judge. But something had clearly shifted. Let's go back to a few weeks before the court date. The boy, whose name is Marcus, had just gotten out of school. He wasn't a troublemaker, though lately it felt like trouble kept finding him anyway. That day, it had been a misunderstanding. A kid said something disrespectful. Marcus pushed him, and by the time teachers broke it up, only Marcus was left standing there. The other kid's story sounded better, cleaner, and Marcus had already been suspended once before, for something else he didn't start. That evening, his mom was quiet, not angry, just tired. She worked long shifts at the hospital and didn't have the energy to fight the world every time it tried to crush her son. But she never stopped trying. She made him dinner, sat him down at the kitchen table and told him again how important it was to remember who he was. "You are not what people think they see," she said. "You're your grandfather's grandson, you're mine. Don't let them take that away from you." His grandfather Elijah was a man of quiet strength, a war veteran, a mentor, the kind of person who never raised his voice because he never needed to. He passed away a year ago, but Marcus still remembered everything he said, especially his stories about justice. Real justice, the kind that treated people like human beings, not just names on paper. It was Elijah who told Marcus years ago that people's hearts can change in a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "all it takes is a reminder that we're all connected somehow." That's why Marcus kept the photo. It wasn't for him. It was for the people who forgot. Then there was that bus ride. It was raining hard, and Marcus had taken the long route home after school. He liked sitting on the bus and watching the world blur past. That day he was tired, and had just sunk into his seat when she got on. The pregnant woman looked like she'd been through a day even rougher than his. Wet hair clinging to her cheeks, one hand on her lower back, the other clutching a tote bag. Nobody moved. Marcus stood up without a second thought. "You can have my seat," he said. She smiled, surprised, and sat down gratefully. "Thank you, sweetheart." They didn't talk after that. Just rode in silence as the rain tapped against the windows. But right before her stop, she turned to him, reached into her bag, and handed him a folded note. "Open it later," she said gently. "And thank you again." Marcus had almost forgotten about the note that night. It was only after dinner, after his mom had gone to bed, that he remembered and opened it. The handwriting was neat, careful, and what it said made his chest tighten. "I know this might seem strange, but I recognized you. Or at least, I recognize that kindness in you. My father was once saved by someone who looked just like you. A young black soldier during the war who pulled him to safety when everyone else had given up. He never forgot that moment. Neither did I. Maybe this is life's way of returning the favor. If you ever need help, this is my name, this is my number, don't be afraid to call." At the bottom was her name, Rachel Henley. Marcus didn't know what to make of it at first. It felt like something out of a movie, but he kept the note, tucked it right next to the family photo in his backpack, just in case. And now, weeks later, he stood in that courtroom, photo in hand, facing a judge who looked like he was seeing something that shook him to his core. The silence stretched until the judge finally cleared his throat and shifted in his seat. "This photo," the judge said slowly, voice low and strange. "Where did you get it?" Marcus blinked. "It's my family. My grandfather took it." "What was his name?" "Elijah Thomas." The judge's lips parted just slightly, then pressed together again. It was clear to everyone in the room that something was happening, something that wasn't in the script. The judge leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench now, and looked at the photo again like he was trying to piece together something long forgotten. No one dared interrupt. Not the lawyers, not the bailiff, not even the court reporter whose fingers hovered uncertainly above the keys. Marcus held his ground. He didn't know what the judge was thinking, or why this old photo had such a deep effect on him. But in that moment, he wasn't scared, just curious, confused, waiting for something to make sense. Outside, the sky was darkening. A storm was rolling in. The city buzzed with noise and life and movement, unaware of the silent storm unraveling inside that courtroom. And then, almost under his breath, the judge said, "Elijah Thomas. He saved my life. But before anyone could react, before the weight of those words could land fully, the judge suddenly straightened up and cleared his throat again, louder this time. "We'll take a brief recess," he announced, banging the gavel once. The sound echoed like thunder through the room. Marcus watched him stand and walk out without another word, still holding the photograph. He had no idea what was coming next. No clue how that one act of kindness on a rainy bus ride, or one photo of a family who loved him, could crack open a history that had been buried for decades. But deep down, he felt something shifting. Not safety. Not yet. But something. The courtroom emptied slowly. Whispers filled the space. His public defender asked a few questions, but Marcus barely heard him. All he could think about was the look on that judge's face, the way his voice changed when he said his grandfather's name. And in his pocket, the note from the woman on the bus felt heavier than it ever had. Something was coming. Marcus sat alone on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, staring down at the scuffed floor tiles. His hands rested in his lap, still shaky from the unexpected shift that had just happened. The photo was gone, still in the judge's hand. That part bothered him, not because he feared it was lost, but because that picture meant something. It held memories, proof, and now it had triggered something in a man who was supposed to decide his fate. People walked past him, some whispering, others just staring. He was used to being stared at, but today felt different. Not pity, not judgment, something in between. His public defender, a woman named Linda Torres, sat next to him, flipping through her notes with tight lips. "I've been in a lot of these courtrooms," she said quietly. "I've never seen a judge stop mid-sentence like that, especially not him." Marcus glanced over. "You know him? Judge Mallory? Everyone in this building knows him. Tough on crime, barely blinks when sentencing kids like you." She paused. "But I've never seen him look like that. Like he just saw a ghost." Marcus swallowed. "He said my grandfather saved his life." Linda raised an eyebrow. "That's big. If it's true, it could change everything." But Marcus wasn't so sure. Change didn't come easy, especially not for people who already made up their minds. He'd been taught that early. It was why his mother always told him to walk carefully, speak clearly, never give anyone a reason to fear him. Even when he was just being a kid. While they waited, his mind drifted again to the woman on the bus, Rachel Henley. He hadn't told anyone about the note. Not his mom. Not even Linda. He wasn't sure why, maybe because part of him thought it was just a nice gesture, something he shouldn't lean on. But now, after seeing how fast things could flip, he started wondering, who was Rachel Henley? Why had her words felt so heavy, so intentional? Elsewhere in the courthouse, Judge Mallory stood in his chambers, staring at the photo he'd taken from Marcus. He held it gently, the way someone might hold a letter from the past they weren't prepared to receive. His hands were shaking, though he wouldn't admit it. The face in the background, Elijah Thomas, hadn't crossed his mind in years. But now, seeing him again, so close, so present, stirred memories that weren't easy to carry. During the war, Elijah had pulled him from wreckage after an ambush. Mallory had been a young green soldier, not yet hardened by the world. He had passed out from blood loss. When he woke up, Elijah was sitting beside him, humming a tune under his breath like the world hadn't just exploded around them. He'd saved his life, no question. And then they'd parted ways, sent to different units, different paths. Mallory never got to thank him. Now, all these years later, he sat with that man's grandson in his courtroom, on the brink of passing down. A harsh sentence, and he had almost done it without blinking. The photo had stopped him, but it was more than guilt. It was discomfort, a reckoning, the kind that crawls under your skin and makes you question the kind of man you've become. Back outside, Linda's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowned, and turned to Marcus. "They're delaying the hearing until tomorrow," she said. "Judge requested time to review something." Marcus didn't know what that meant, but he nodded anyway. At home that night, he sat, at the kitchen table while his mom paced. She always paced when she was nervous. The moment he told her what happened, she dropped her purse and just stared at him. "He knew your grandfather?" she asked, voice low. "Said he saved his life." She shook her head slowly. "I knew your grandfather had stories, but I didn't know that one." Marcus pulled the note from his pocket, hesitated, then slid it across the table. "What's this?" "From a woman on the bus. She said her dad was saved by someone who looked like me. A black soldier." His mom read the note, eyes scanning it twice. Her hands trembled as she folded it back up. "Do you know who she is?" He shrugged. "She gave her number. I think you should call her." That night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the note under the dim light. His fingers hovered over his phone for a long time before he finally dialed the number. It rang twice before someone picked up. "Hello?" The voice was familiar, soft, slightly surprised. "Hi, this is Marcus. From the bus?" A pause. "Oh, Marcus, I didn't think you'd call." "I wasn't sure I should," he admitted. "But something happened today, and I think your note might mean more than I thought." They spoke for 10 minutes. Then 20, then over an hour. Rachel told him her father was a veteran too, and that he kept a photo of the man who saved him by his bedside until the day he died. She never knew the man's name, only his face. When Marcus stood on the bus and gave up his seat, she saw that same kindness, that same quiet strength. "He looked just like you," she said. "And I felt like I was looking at a piece of my father's past." I don't believe in coincidences like that anymore. They agreed to meet. Not right away, but soon. She said she might have something else to show him, something her father left behind. Marcus felt a strange calm after that call, but the weight of tomorrow still loomed. Meanwhile, Judge Mallory wasn't sleeping. He sat in his study, poring through old military records, looking for confirmation of what he already knew. He found the name, Elijah Thomas. Multiple commendations, letters of recommendation, and one note from a commander that simply read, "He sees people, not uniforms. That's rare." The judge remembered that day in the field, how Elijah had laughed, even while dragging him to cover, how he kept telling stories to distract from the pain. That man had carried so much and yet never made you feel small. And now, he was about to sentence his grandson. Morning came, cloudy and tense. Marcus returned to the courtroom, this time feeling the weight of more than just his own story. He felt like he was carrying history on his back. When Judge Mallory entered, he didn't look at anyone for a moment. Just sat, straightened his papers, and then met Marcus's eyes. "I've had some time to reflect," he began, voice calmer than before. Marcus braced himself, unsure of what would come next. Linda shifted in her seat. The court grew quiet again, but the judge didn't continue, not yet. He just looked at Marcus, and behind his eyes something unreadable stirred. Regret, responsibility, maybe even fear. And then he said something no one expected. "I need to speak to you." Privately. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge stood and motioned to the bailiff. Marcus stood too, confused, following the man who held so much of his future in his hands. Behind closed doors, the truth was about to come out, but not yet.